So in order to make a good soup, you gotta start with a good homemade stock. I'm doing a vegetable stock today, but chicken will also be very, very acceptable. I mentioned this in some of my videos that if you save the herb stems, just dry them out on a pie dish like this and chuck them on top of the refrigerator. Then you could use them to flavor soups and stocks and that kind of stuff. It's a really easy thing to whip through. So I'm gonna let this simmer for 2 hours, not really any longer than that because the ingredients will start to break down if you simmer them for too long, and then it's gonna cloud the stock. No good. All you really need for a good vegetable stock is this classic mirror pot. We're talking 2-to-1 ratio. We have onions, we have celery, we have carrot. Also, I have a small handful of black peppercorns, 3 cloves, a couple bay leaves, 3 garlic cloves, and then of course the herb stems. So in a stock pot, everything's just gonna get chucked in. I'm not gonna do a sachet piece or anything like that. It's quick and easy, delicious. Just chuck everything into the stock pot like that. So with the garlic cloves, I cut that root end off. Little things like that make a fat difference. You want things to be tasting as fresh as possible, and you're gonna wanna eliminate any kind of impurities. I want this stock to taste nice and fresh, so I'm gonna remove the outer papers of all these ingredients and remove root ends and just get everything clean, no dirt. I mean, your stock is only gonna be as good as the ingredients you're putting into it, so if you're just putting all the rubbish in, you're just not gonna end up with a nice and clean tasting stock. Does that make sense? Whenever you're cutting up a bunch of things, it's important to keep your cutting board nice and clean. Have a nice little bowl to keep your scraps in. That's gonna go in the compost a little bit later on. Cut one thing at a time. Onions, same thing. I'm just gonna cut the root ends off, remove the outer paper layer. Next, with onions, cut it horizontally once and then twice vertically. Cut around that root end. Like I said, I wanna keep the vegetable stock as clean as possible, so root ends go in there. Bench scrapers are really nice for picking up big handfuls of ingredients off the cutting board. Rough chops is all you need to do. I don't normally peel carrots. One of those things, if you want to peel them, go ahead and peel them. Kind of the same thing, rough chop. Got everything in there. Simple, right? So I'm just gonna fill up the water level to like right there on the pot. Bring this up to a boil, reduce the heat to medium low, and then let it simmer for about 1.5 to 2 hours.
Here's a quick overhead shot of all the ingredients that are going into the soup. Grab yourself a sharp knife and start with the onion. We're going to give the onion a small dice. I really love these small yellow sweet onions. They have such a fantastic flavor profile and they're going to give the soup a great flavor. Once the onions are chopped, then go ahead and put them into a bowl. Next, we grab the 3 garlic cloves and give them a rough mince. Once the garlic cloves are minced, go ahead and put them into a bowl. Now we have the fennel. Kind of like how I cut up the onion, I'm cutting it horizontally once and vertically a few times. And the green leafy part that's on top of fennel, I just cut that off and chucked it in my compost. Rotate the fennel slightly and run your knife through it vertically, giving this a rough chop. As I'm chopping up all these ingredients, I'm doing my best to keep the rough chops relatively the same size. Now we have some carrots. You could choose to peel them or not. Either way, give the carrots a rough chop and put them in the same bowl as the fennel. As far as the bell pepper is concerned, stand it upright and cut it around the seeds and the placenta, cutting the pepper essentially into sections. Now with each section, cut each section into 1/2 inch thick strips and then cut those strips into a rough chop. Put the cut up pieces of bell pepper into the same bowl with the carrots and the fennel. Fresh herbs, rosemary and sage, grabbing the herbs tightly in between my fingertips and running my knife through the herbs. If you don't have access to fresh herbs at this point in time, you could go ahead and substitute dried herbs. Just use 1/3 less of the amount. After you have that first pass through the herbs, go ahead and cut through the herbs a couple more times. Just be careful not to over chop them. Once you chop the herbs, put them into a separate dish where you could grab pinches of them as needed. With my Dutch oven being warmed up over medium-low heat for a few minutes, I go in with 2 tablespoons of oil and then the onions. After the onions go in, hit them with a little pinch of salt.
Each of these ingredients all have their own individual flavor, so we're gonna be able to treat them individually, right? Extracting all the flavor that the onions have with a little pinch of salt. So we're gonna cook the onions down until they start to turn translucent and slightly caramelized. Add the garlic and then sweat the garlic down with a little bit of rosemary and sage and then just build the flavor off of that. And then add the rest of the ingredients, you know what I mean? So we're just building, layering the flavors as we go, right? It really makes a difference cooking in steps like this rather than just chucking everything in a pot. It's really what you do to the ingredients that make all the difference. I always say that. An enameled cast iron Dutch oven, so I'm using a wooden spoon to stir the ingredients. Just want to get a little bit of color on these onions. They're starting to turn translucent. Onions started getting a little bit of color to them, so now we add the garlic, a little pinch of salt, pinch of herbs, a little bit of pepper. So really just want to cook that rawness of the garlic, which takes about a minute. Drop in that cumin and toast it a little bit. It'll become fragrant. Rosemary ingredients, vinegar, and then we'll put in the peppers, fennel, and the carrot. Go in with the vegetable stock. I want to have just enough stock in there so that it just comes up to the level of the ingredients. But I'm gonna need more than that. Just went with 2 cups because I didn't really know how much I was gonna need. A lot of times when you're doing blended soups, it's kind of by sight more than a measurement for how much liquid you need. So I'm gonna go with 2 more cups. So it's gonna be 4 cups total if I use all of it. Yeah, there you go. Just so that you can barely have it come up to the level of the ingredients. Consistency obviously is a personal preference. Since it's gonna simmer off for a while, might as well add a little bit more. So when you're doing blended soups, you can really bring that liquid level up to the level of the ingredients or just go slightly above it. Kind of depends on really how long you need to simmer it for and then how thick or thin you want your soup, right? You're gonna adjust the consistency with adding vegetable stock or not adding as much. You wanna bring the soup up to a boil and reduce the heat to like a medium-low, let it simmer till those ingredients are nice and soft. Simmering it might take about 10-15 minutes. The whipped cream is pretty easy. If you have a mixing bowl, and then really just a lot of whisking is involved with this. Could take about 5 minutes of just whisking like this. Arm will get tired. That's what you have, then that's what you have. And a couple drops of lime juice in there. And lime juice is just there to kind of help cut through the fat on the cream. Not too much salt though, because this blue cheese is salty. Has a nice acidity to it. It's creamy. Crumbling it up a little bit in my hands. I love savory whipped cream, so you could do so many things with this. Definitely needs a little more salt. A little bit more of that lime juice. It's not really coming through. You gotta taste as you go, you know what I mean? Adjust seasoning. Give it a taste, adjust. Give it a taste, adjust. Until you dial it in. There it is. Now, just waiting for the soup. After about 10 minutes, I'll grab a big piece of bell pepper and give it a taste. Almost cooked all the way through. A little bit more salt, a little more pepper, and let that simmer for another 5-6 minutes, something like that. See where it's at. Gotta use some sort of a blender, obviously, since it's a blended soup. You could use a NutriBullet, immersion blender, or a high power blender. This would be really good if you put some lentils in there, some beans, put a little bit of meat in it. You can, sweat down some bacon with the onions in the very beginning stages. I just happen to like smoother soups, so I'm gonna strain the pulp. This is obviously a optional step. And depending on how good your blender is, you might not even have to do this at all. Just using a small ladle, slightly working that soup through the fine mesh strainer. Ended up being a little on the thin side, so I'm gonna put it back on heat and let it reduce slightly. Bring this up to simmer again and let it simmer for about 10 minutes or so until it gets to a thickness that I want. Now that everything's blended up, I want to give this a taste. Kind of see where everything's at. That's a really nice clean flavor. It definitely needs a little bit more salt though. Pepper, the flavor profile's gonna change a little bit too, as this reduces, so you don't want to add too much. It needs a little bit more of this apple cider vinegar just to help kind of round the flavors out. Just a little splash really is all you need. Gotta taste, 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 man. That's how you make good food, is just you taste and taste and taste at every stage of the cooking process. I think that took care of the problem right there. A little bit more salt, just a little. Vinegar is nice in there. Knowing how to season is really important, right? I mean, if you don't season properly, if you just wait till the end of the season your food, then it just tastes salty. Seasoning is salt, pepper, and then vinegar. You add a little bit too much of one of those things, then it'll come through in the food. It's really just enough to round out the flavors, just bring them to life. That looks like a beautiful consistency to me. I like it. Man, that looks so good. It's blue cheese, whipped cream, nice little dollop right in the middle of that. That is beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. Colors on this is really nice. I love that orange kind of red color it has. It smells incredible. Ooh. A lot of good flavor on it. And bell peppers are really, really right up front as you taste that. That is a winner of a soup right here. It really makes a difference making that stock from scratch. All fresh ingredients, you're gonna end up with a fresh tasting, just delicious soup. This will definitely hit the spot on those brisk cold days. You know what I mean? Nice, bright, fresh flavors. Made that stock from scratch. I could literally make this like every day and be happy.